Howdy everybody, it's February 22nd, a Monday. I was unable to do one of these videos last week because of the snowpocalypse, so we're doing it today, and hopefully I'm going to get this spooled up and sent out to you there this afternoon. We're looking at the Great Depression and FDR's solutions and the entry into World War II today. So there's going to be a whole bunch of me turning around looking at the slide because there's going to be a whole bunch of little bitty things on each slide, so I'm just letting you know there's not a ton of cute little stories. Not that they're ever cute, but we'll just see what comes out of my mouth. FDR, right? So FDR, number 32. He's the only president to be elected 4 times, serve 4 times, and then after he's going to die in office. Remember the curse of Tippecanoe. We are going to pass an amendment into the Constitution that says you can only be president twice. So there you go. So he's the only one who served 4 times. Presided over the Great Depression, New Deal, WWII. So we'll talk all about that. He did serve our nation from the wheelchair. So he had polio. When he was elected, he stood mostly, but then as he got older, the polio got him, and so he served the nation from the wheelchair. So you're going to see a lot of these pictures where he's sitting down. Well, there's a reason that he's sitting down, because he doesn't stand up very well. So we have the pictures of Potsdam and Yalta and some other places where we're sitting next to Stalin and he's sitting next to Churchill, and they're all sitting down. Well, yeah, because in a wheelchair. Interesting note that, here's a cute story. Interesting note, there are a ton of people in the United States who had no idea that they were electing a handicapped individual. There's interesting stories out there that say, had people known, they would not have elected him because, handicapped people. I know, here we are in the year 2021, and that's a stupid idea that we would think about that. But fortunately for Roosevelt, this is really still the really beginning of early TV, and so he used the radio, and you can't tell if you're in a wheelchair if you're on the radio. Removed prohibition, tried to pack, married his 5th cousin, Eleanor Roosevelt. I know that seems like weird to us, this 5th cousin, but really, how related are you if you're a 5th cousin? So I guess she didn't even have to change her name. Teddy Roosevelt was there at their wedding. Consistently rated as one of the top 5 presidents in history, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat. More so the Democrats, but the Republicans respect this guy as well, because he helped us get out of the war. Get out of the Great Depression. He got into the war. Happy Monday, everybody! Let's see, the 3 R's. Relief, recovery, and reform. So relief is right now. Gotta have it. Gotta fix it. Give me my $1,400. Right? That's relief. Immediate. Recovery is, all right, how do we get out of this long term? All right, we got to get vaccines into everybody's arms. So that's a recovery issue. How are we going to do that? We got to build up our supplies. We got to get things working. We have to figure out how we get everything from point A to point B. That's a recovery issue. Reform. And reform is big, long-term thinking. All right, how are we never going to find ourselves in this condition again? How can we stop that? So relief is immediate. Recovery is let's fix the bigger problem, and reform is let's just not ever have a problem like this again. All right, so there you go. The first 100 days Congress. I know we were talking about President Biden's first 100 days. His plan was to have, 100 million vaccine doses by the first 100 days of his presidency. He's talking about having all the kids back in school in his first 100 days, or at least the K-8 kids. Not us. But this idea of the first 100 days, get things accomplished. President Trump tried to do this, tried to get the wall built in the first 100 days, tried to repeal Obamacare in the first 100 days, etc., etc. So FDR is going to come up with his 100-day plan. Big sweeping ideas. And since he is a Democratic Congress, they're going to give him a lot of leeway. In fact, he's going to propose legislation. Of course, that's not how that works in the Constitution. The president isn't the president who can veto legislation, but Congress is the one that writes legislation. Well, here FDR had so much power that he basically, he pulled people in from the legislators into the Oval Office and said, by the way, write this down. And so there you go. Supreme Court of the United States was not very happy about that. that he had that much power that he could basically write his own legislation. New Deal legislation was progressive. Unemployment insurance, old age insurance, minimum wage. We'll talk about all that a little bit. So, talk about the money first. The Emergency Banking Relief Act of 1933. The president, he's going to give himself power. The president's going to have the ability to then make policy with banking transactions. Okay. Well, you know, in an emergency, maybe, right? And we're going to create the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, so the FDIC, and we still have that today. So the FDIC basically says, if you put money in the bank, we will guarantee that you will have money when you go to the bank that you can withdraw it. We will guarantee. Now, we can't guarantee that you're going to be able to withdraw all of it. In fact, we can only guarantee in 1935 that you will be able to withdraw $5,000. So if there's a run on the bank, like we've had, we've now talked about, 15 panics at this point. So if there's a panic and people rush to the bank, and suddenly the bank's like, sorry, I'm out of my money, I'm out of money, I can't give you any money. No, the FDIC guarantees that at some point you will get your $5,000 back. Now, here's the crazy thing, if you have $6,000 in the bank, they only guaranteed $5,000 of it. So you may lose $1,000. But there's a trick to that. What you do is you just have two accounts, right? One in your name, one in your mom's name, one in your wife's name, one in your dad's name, one in your little brother's name, one in your dog's name, and suddenly you have $30,000 of insured money. Did I name 6 things? 6 times 5? That's since changed. 1950 it went up, in 2008, and I think right now it's $250,000. So if you have $250,000 in the bank, if you have $250,000 in the bank, then it is insured that you can get it out, even if there's a huge panic. And again, you know, if you're a billionaire, then you divide that amongst 1,000 different banks and 1,000 different names, and then hide some under your mattress, or put it in an offshore account, you know, Switzerland or whatever. Dodge the taxes. FDR is going to take us off the gold standard, and he's going to say, no more gold transactions. We are going to use paper money. I wonder how that's going to work out. Okay. So we started this with Hoover, talked about how Hoover said, let's get people back to work, and we're just going to we're going to build stuff. So like the Hoover Dam and things like that. FDR is going to take this idea and he is going to run with it. He's going to put millions back to work. And some of these jobs, well, they're just busy work, but the government's going to pay them a salary to do it. So here are a couple of the different groups, and there's 1,000 different acronyms here that we're going to be looking at. And so get out your notes. Here we go. The CCC, the Civilian Conservation Corps, so they're going to be, you're talking about conservation, so this is the Secretary of Interior when he's not doing Teapot Dome. Restoration, firefighter, and flood control, swamp drainage, 3 million guys. All right, sure. The FERA, the FERA, gave states direct relief payments for wages for work projects. Kind of what we're looking at right now for, for the COVID whole thing and sending money to the states. The CWA, temporary jobs for thousands, which include leaf raking and other manual jobs. Here's a rake, go out into the park and rake the leaves, we will pay you money. I mean, you got to get these people back to work. So what do you, this is before McDonald's, this is before Walmart, so what are you going to do, right? Agricultural Adjustment Act, the AAA, millions of dollars to help farmers pay their mortgages, and the Home Owners Loan Corporation, the HOLC, help millions with home mortgages. Anybody recognize this? Yeah, you probably don't recognize the cartoon, but you may recognize the statue, right? And so this is FDR, you can kind of tell because he's got the little big glasses. FDR, and it says FDR on his shirt, so that's a giveaway. And it says billions in his little bag, and he is throwing the money around. And so down here it says the sower. And so, anybody recognize it? Anybody recognize it? Anybody recognize it? Okay, so it turns out that the sower is a reasonably famous statue. Oh, look! Oh, there he is. Except in the sower, he's sowing seeds of education, because, you know, it's very philosophical. And does anybody recognize the campus? Anybody recognize the campus? This is on the, I was about to say the south lawn, but it might be the north lawn. Or the oval, the south oval, the north oval. I think, you know what, I'm going to say it's on the north oval, you know what, on the north oval at University of Oklahoma. There you go, University of Oklahoma, right? Yeah. Is it the south oval? It's been a while since I've been down there. Moving on. FDR is going to take this newfangled radio concept and he's going to use it to his advantage. He's going to, every so often, get onto the radio, basically interrupt all broadcasting. Not there's a lot of broadcasting. Oh, little orphan Annie. And he's going to have these talks. And we call them the Fireside Chats because it's great Uncle FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. It's great Uncle FDR, and he's sitting and he's talking in these nice, calm, soothing phrases, and it's all going to be okay, guys. It's all going to be okay. It talks about how if you take all of his speeches and you put it through the machine will kick back and say that, what is it, 80%? No, 90%? What does it say? 80% of the words that he used were in the 1,000 most popular words in English language. So he wasn't talking way up here. He wasn't using very big words like, Monday morning. I can't think of any big words. Oh, that's eleemosynary. Related to charity. That's what that word means. So anyway, great Uncle FDR sit down and he'd talk to people, and people felt better about what was going on because they knew that this guy was in charge. I wonder if he had the ability to tweet. If he'd be like, "Hey everybody." The WPA. All right, so the WPA, the Works Progress Administration. This is one of the bigger ones, and we still have evidence around today with regard to this. And so we're talking about this is kind of what Hoover started. We're going to build libraries. We're going to build basketball courts. We're going to build parks. We're going to build hospitals. We're going to build jails and schools and museums and streets. And there you go. Put as many people as we can put into work as we can. And then arts. Hire a whole bunch of artists because, you know, they're just sitting there twiddling their thumbs. And to paint murals on bridges and street, I was going to say street walls, but we all know what I'm saying. Let's see, I think the Oklahoma City Symphonic Band, right? The Oklahoma City Symphonic Orchestra. I think they're a WPA orchestra, getting people back to work. And so musicians too. So the WPA, through our tax dollars, gets the Oklahoma City band together, and then people can go enjoy a nice concert out in the park. Shave your beard, get a job. The National Recovery Administration pushed for fair practices. That seems good. Working hours are reduced. So working hours. And this is an interesting idea. Remember that we've had these Supreme Court cases that say you are in charge of negotiating with your boss of how many hours you want to work. And if the boss doesn't want to pay you that much, or the boss doesn't want you to work that many hours, well, then find a different boss. So it's up to you. And we've talked about that, Lochner versus New York, et cetera, et cetera. We'll do more on that with, AP government. And here, the NRA, different NRA, right? The National Recovery Administration is going to say, look, we need to reduce people's hours, which doesn't make any sense, right? Because if you reduce people's hours, you're going to reduce their paycheck, and we need people to go, we need people to have money. During the Depression, but here's the deal, you reduce people's hours, now you have extra hours out there to hire more people to then take those hours. So more people are getting paid, although they're getting paid less than what they normally would be paid, right? National minimum wage. They're going to try to establish this at 25 cents an hour. Woo! 25 cents an hour. And someday, public school teachers, maybe we'll get that much money at some point. 25, that'd be great. Supreme Court voted it down. They said it was unconstitutional. Why is it unconstitutional? Because the Supreme Court said each individual state should be able to regulate its own state minimum wage, and all these companies that cross the border, truck drivers or whatever, or trains or companies that cross the border. I was about to say McDonald's, but we don't have McDonald's yet. That falls under the Interstate Commerce Clause, also AP government, and so therefore the Supreme Court says it's unconstitutional. You can't have a national minimum wage. Obviously, we're going to change that here in a slide or three. Okay, so we have an issue with the farmers. So let's see, the AAA. What does the AAA stand for? Huh. The AAA. I bet you it says Agriculture Something Administration. American? It might be American. I don't know. We're going to have to look that up. The AAA attempted to reduce crop surpluses. Okay, right. Yeah, see, that makes sense. Agriculture crop surpluses. So remember we had too much food. And so the government was buying this extra food, and some think that maybe that led to the Depression, et cetera, et cetera. So we had too much food. So what do you do if you have too much food? You farm less food. If you farm less food, then there's less food to go to the grocery markets. If there's less food to go to the grocery markets, that means that there's less supply. If there's less supply and it's the same demand, then you can, or more demand, then you can bring the price up. Farmers get paid more. Here's the problem. All these farmers are like, hey, if the prices of the food are going to go up, we're just going to start making more food. Well, no, then the prices are going to go down. So the government said to a lot of the farmers, hey, how about this? We will pay you not to farm. We will pay you to farm dirt. Like, don't plant anything in your fields, and we'll pay you for that out of tax money. Can you imagine? Hey, everybody, if you don't, this is a hypothetical situation. If you don't turn in your supplemental readings this week, I'll still give you an A. Because that makes it fair for everybody. Please note that is not what I'm going to do. Do your supplemental readings. The Supreme Court of the United States said, no, you can't do that. You can't use tax money to pay people to do nothing. No, that makes no sense. So the FDR and the government got together and they said, all right, we will tell the farmers that if they can't plant nothing, they have to plant soil conserving crops. So ask yourself, what would be a soil conserving crop? Grass. So how do you plant grass? You don't. You just basically let it grow out there. So it really is the same thing, but now that the word's in there, oh no, I'm actually soil conserving crops. See how that works? Your tax dollars at work. Actually, your great-grandma's tax dollars at work. Great-grandmother's tax dollars. The Dust Bowl is 1933. The Dust Bowl. Yuck. Man, can you imagine? Here comes these dust storms. Golly. Oh, and why were the dust storms created? Interestingly enough, because we're farming dirt. When you don't have crops, in the soil, you guys know this from environmental science. When you don't have 7th grade science or whenever you check that. When you don't have crops in the soil, then the roots aren't holding the soil down, and then suddenly the dirt can be blown everywhere. And we had this really weird El Nino effect, and the winds come sweeping down the plains. Somebody should write a song with that. Down the plain. 1935, they said no foreclosures on banks for 5 years. Supreme Court kicked that too. They said it was unconstitutional. And then the Indian Reorganization Act of 1934. So in 1934, FDR and the gang got together and said, we've been mistreating these Indians, and we've been trying to the Apple Plan. Remember the Apple Plan? So now we think that's probably actually wrong. A little political correctness here. We think that's actually wrong, and maybe we should allow the Native Americans to, experience their roots and let them start, be Native American again. The Federal Securities Act and the SEC, Securities and Exchange Commission of 1934, the SEC, we still have this today. And so the SEC basically says you can't cheat in the stock market. So how do you cheat, you ask? So how you would cheat is that if you had information ahead of time before it became public, and then you traded on that information, like you sold a stock really quick because you know that there was going to be a situation and that company was going to fall apart, so you sold all of your stock before they fell apart, or that that there's going to be this huge, wonderful oranges crop, and so you put all your money in oranges before the public information comes out, and then now you have all this money back when the price is low, and then the oranges are great, and people are like, oh, we're going to buy oranges, and suddenly the prices shoot up, and now you're a cajillionaire. That's illegal. You can't do that. You have to follow the rules like everybody else does. And so, for example, if you knew, hypothetically, if you knew that there was a coronavirus coming, like back in, last January, and then you put a whole bunch of money into, say, for example, stocks, into medical masks and things like that, and let's say hypothetically you were a senator or a congressman in the United States of America who was on a committee that got that information before they sent it out to the rest of the people, and then you made millions of dollars on that, that would be illegal. That would be illegal. Fortunately, that didn't. Okay, yeah, it happened. The Tennessee Valley Authority. So remember that Hoover said, we're going to build a dam over there on the Colorado River, call it the Hoover Dam, but we're not going to build a dam over there in Tennessee. And the reason we're not going to build it in Tennessee is because that we already have dams over there. If we have dams over there and we build a public dam, then the public dam is going to cut into the private dam's electrical stash of money. And FDR said, no, forget that, we're going to build some public dams. So they build the Tennessee Valley Authority Dam and the TVA, right? And so, and what FDR was trying to do here is he built the dam and then looked at the numbers and said, okay, a dam on this river generates this much electricity, and that much electricity, how much that cost. And then he said, now let's look to see how much the private electric companies are charging people. Oh, they're charging people way more than what it actually costs. And so, yeah, the companies weren't very happy with FDR about this. Interesting. The Republicans called this a socialist, communist plot to take over the electric grid. Texas. Moving on. It's not funny. I mean, people died, but Texas. Housing and Social Security. So let's see. The FHA in 1934, small home loans for purposes of letting people buy houses. So we still have FHA loans today, and they tend to be you have to jump through some hoops. You have to jump through some hoops to get them, but they're pretty affordable for a lot of us. And then the Social Security Act of 1935. So before the Social Security Act of 1935, the game plan was when you got older and decided to retire, that whatever you had in the bank was what you had in the bank. And that was it. You weren't going to get any more. And so you could move in with your family, and your family could support you in your old age, and you could sit around and tell stories about how it was during the World War I or Spanish-American War. See, 1935. I guess technically, I've been pretty old, but I guess you could be a Civil War. You'd be pretty young, or pretty old at that point. But tell stories around the campfire. Here is the problem in 1935, though. The FDR and the government said was that works out. You just put old people and go back and live with their families if you live on the farm. But people aren't living on the farms anymore. People are moving to the cities, and so you can't afford Grandpa anymore. So what are we going to do with Grandpa and Grandma? How about Social Security? So, new rule. When you get a paycheck, and you think you're making $15 an hour, what is it in Oklahoma right now? $7.50 or something like that. whatever it is. You think you're making that much money, but then you see the taxes, and one of the taxes that gets taken out of your check is your Social Security. And so then, theoretically, at the end, when you retire and when you hit 65-ish, when you hit right now it might go up to 70. When you hit 65, well, it's the Democrats are in charge. It might drop down to 60. Ooh, 10 more years. Then you get your Social Security check, which isn't a lot, but the idea is that it's enough that perhaps it will sustain you for, it's not very much money. Provide for old age, specialized categories, right. New Deal labor, the NLRA, the Wagner Act, helps labor unions, great. The Fair Labor Standards Act, 38. Minimum wage, okay, so we finally did get a minimum wage in 1938 because they wrote it a little differently, and the Supreme Court's like, okay, we'll go with that. And labor by children under 16 was forbidden. So all of you, I guess if you're watching this, you're probably at least 16. But back when you were 15, you're like, oh man, I wish I could go to work. So you're like, the good days when I thought work was cool. And now you're like, oh man, I gotta close tonight. Ugh. I was there. Believe me, I was there. Anyway, we still have a rule that says you got to be at least 16, unless it's a family-owned business. You got to be at least 16 to work. So I don't know if you've picked up on this, but FDR and the Supreme Court, they're not getting along, and so FDR says, you know what? I'm going to fix you, Supreme Court. New rule. If you are 70 years old on Supreme Court, which that's a lot of them. Then I'm going to ask you to retire. And if you don't retire, then what we're going to do is I'm going to appoint another person on the bench to basically sit with you because you're senile. So either retire or I'm going to bring in a buddy. Yes, totally unconstitutional. I mean, it's not unconstitutional because the legislature determines the number of judges on the bench on the Supreme Court, and FDR can tell the legislature whatever he wants them to do. So, I mean, technically it's not unconstitutional to do this, but he basically threatened the Supreme Court justices. Now, the Supreme Court justices, they did something really interesting. They rolled over and they said, okay, we're back in your pocket now. Anyway, many justices flipped votes and became more progressive in their opinions. Interesting how that is. A couple of political cartoons. Here we got FDR, and he's talking to the guy, and he says, hey, do you think you like how I changed the Supreme Court? You got the standard Supreme Court building, and then the two wings of extra Supreme Court justices that he wanted to pack it. I think at one point he was like, maybe we should have like 15 judges. Like right now we have 9. We used to have 7. We used to have 5, actually, but now we have 9, which makes sense because you got to have an odd number just in case there's a vote to 5. It doesn't matter. And then over here we have the FDR is talking to the referee, and he says, "Hey, these guys, they're old." And talking about the Supreme Court justices over here. It's a clever cartoon. Spending, pulling spending out of the habit, out of the rabbit, pulling the rabbit out of the hat. Social Security checks were taken out of paychecks as a reduction in national spending. FDR cut back on his spending. John Maynard Keynes says, prime the pump. Run a small deficit. If you run a small deficit, then you're priming the pump. Who said that before? Who said that? Oh, Alexander Hamilton, who said, hey, what we need to do is we need to have a deficit so that then people will be like, oh, you're a good credit company. Good credit. You're going to have Alexander Hamilton's Treasury plan. It was great. And then the Hatch Act, just kind of throw this in here interestingly enough. In 1939, the Hatch Act, you cannot use government funds to run for political office or political campaigns. We are still dealing with this in 2021, right? If you've been paying attention to the news, we've got the old, okay, so I'm contributing money to, my tax dollars are going to a politician, and then that politician uses those tax dollars of his salary or her salary to then campaign for the next election. Well, that's illegal. They have to use their own money. So when you sign your $100 check and you send it off to the Trump campaign or the Biden campaign or whoever's campaign it is, that's not taxes. You're actually sending it to that person or sending it to their company. That'll get you in trouble. We recently, just like yesterday, I was reading through some stuff on my feeds that were like, oh, hey, the governor of this state used tax money to go on a trip to then, get on a plane to then go campaign. It's like, oh, nope, that'll get you in trouble. The Hatch Act, 1939. Man, it's 2021. You think people would figure this out yet? But it's a cute little cartoon. Here we have FDR, and you can tell because his little bitty glasses. And all the different little things he's trying to do, the CCC and the AAA and the WPA and all this kind of stuff, and he turns it on and gets this little bitty drip. Aww. He tried, right? He tried. By the way, all these things put together, we call this the New Deal. The New Deal. All these things put together. All of his works, projects, well, everything is listed on the little cartoon, right? And it still didn't work. I mean, maybe if we'd given it a couple more years, maybe it might have worked, but it didn't work. It didn't get us out of the Depression. It didn't fix us. Did it help with relief? Yes, it put people back to work, sure. Did it help with recovery? Yes, some programs did recover, and we started to pull out, did it help with reform? No, we're still in the Depression. And how are we going to stop being in the Depression? Oh, let's just declare war. We call this the alphabet soup. The alphabet soup. President Roosevelt's alphabet soup agencies. And he's going to go all the way down through that list. And so, oh wait, it's got it right there. Look at that. Oh, I missed it. The Agricultural Adjustment Administration. I had the word administration and agriculture. I got 2 of the 3. I feel pretty good about that. The CCC, the CWA, all the way down to the WPA. And here we have Roosevelt, and you got all the little kids dancing around him, and it's all wonderful, and it looks like Ring Around the Rosies. Ashes, ashes, we all fall down. New topic, World War II. The London Conference in 1933. 66 countries are going to get together, and they're going to, meet to discuss ways to defeat the worldwide depression. Yes. Yes, good for them. The United States doesn't show up, because FDR's like, no, we don't need y'all. We're the United States of America. We don't need help. And so, without the United States of America there, it all fell apart. Kind of like the League of Nations. When it all falls apart, this increases the global trend towards nationalism. Well, if the U.S. isn't going to help us, if they're going to be on their own, then we're going to be on our own. Well, if you're going to be on our own, or you're on, then we're going to be on our own. If you're going to be on our own, and decreases global economic cooperation. Meanwhile, in South America, as last we heard, we had the Roosevelt corollary, right? Nobody can mess with South America except for us, if your name's Roosevelt. But this Roosevelt said, no, we need to play nice. We need to play nice. And so the United States granted the Philippines independence in 1934. Well, 1934, and they said, we're going to give you independence in 1934 in 12 years, in 46. And interestingly enough, that was actually, they're looking down the road, right? Because the Philippines, not that far away from Japan. If Japan attacks the Philippines and their territory, then we're going to have to defend them, and that'd get awkward. So let's make them independent, and then they can fend for themselves. That's good policy, U.S. The U.S. finally recognizes the Soviet Union. I mean, the Soviet Union's been there for 20 years, 18 years at that point, yeah, we'll say that. Finally, we're going to say, okay, the United States officially recognizes the Soviet Union. We're now actually, when we write our letters to Russia, we're not going to put Russia on the letter. We're going to put Soviet Union. So it's a big deal. FDR announces the good neighbor policy that Hoover really kind of started. The U.S. is going to move out of Haiti. We're going to reduce our footprint in Cuba and Panama. And we're going to seek diplomatic solutions with Mexico over oil issues. And, oh, as last we left with tariffs, right? Tariffs, we were jacking this tariff up, and they were jacking their tariffs up, talking about Europe, and then we were jacking ours up higher, and then World War I. Reciprocal Trade Agreement Act of 1934. If you drop your tariff, I'll drop my tariff. And so there you go. 21 countries make the deal. And when everybody drops their tariffs, we can have more trade and we have more trust. That seems like a good idea. Dr. Seuss. Dr. Seuss. He's not Dr. Seuss. So here we have Uncle Sam laying in bed, and Europe laying in her bed? I don't know. And the United States of America says, "Oh, what a lucky thing we've got separate beds." Because over there in Europe, they've got this terrible, terrible diseases. They've got the Stalin itch, and Hitleritis, and the Blitzpox, and Nazi fever, and fascist fever, and the Italian mumps. You see the Italian mumps way down here. But the United States, we are in separate beds, and so we don't have to worry about it. Oh, I wonder what he's really trying to say. The Great Depression spawned totalitarianism, right? We have we have Uncle Joe in the Soviet Union. We've got Benito Mussolini. I'm reading a book right now about Benito Mussolini. He's an interesting character. I mean, we like to think that, that I've got a pretty good sized ego. This is where at least one of you just rolled your eyes like, I can see you rolling your eyes right now. But Benito, man, he's got himself a big old ego out there, like a super ego. Well, that's a different thing. Sigmund Freud stuff. I don't have time. And then this guy named Adolf Hitler, you've never heard of, in Germany. Hitler and Mussolini are going to make a pact. The Rome-Berlin axis. There you go in Europe. And Japan is going to just going to walk out of the Washington Naval Treaty. Remember the Washington Naval Treaty? That's the 4-country agreement that says we're only going to have X amount of battleships out there in the Pacific Ocean, and they can only be this big. And Japan's going to go, we're not playing by that rule anymore. We probably should have listened. And they begin to build more battleships. And then in 1935, Mussolini, the Italian dictator, Mussolini is going to attack Ethiopia. And you think, so? Some people argue that might actually have been the beginning of World War II. I mean, it wasn't Hitler, but you could argue. But most of us say, no, September 1st, 1939. Do I have that up here? It might be on the next slide. U.S. isolation policy. All right, so the U.S. isolation policy, between us and Europe and Japan. Between us and Europe, there's a huge ocean, the pond, right, the Atlantic Ocean. And between us and Japan, there's a huger ocean between us and Japan, the Pacific Ocean. So we're okay. And if Europe decides to get into their mess up their business like they did in World War I, we are not going to get involved with their business. And in 1934, look at that, the United States, the Johnson Debt Default Act, U.S. will not loan money to countries who defaulted in last war. Good for us. Hey, we gave you money last time in World War I. You have not paid us back yet. And so we're not going to give you money if you ask for money anymore. we're going to give it to them. Neutrality Acts. Okay, FDR. When the president declares the existence of a foreign war, which is what FDR is going to do here in a little bit, certain restrictions go into effect. Let's see. No American could hitch a ride on a ship, on a foreign ship that is involved in the war. No selling or transporting of munitions, so like guns and bullets and tanks and planes. And then no loans to any country that is fighting a war. Man, that sounds good. We're going to be neutral. Look at us. Because America did not aid the Allies, historians believe that action actually encouraged the Axis Germany, Italy, and Japan, to believe that we were going to stay out of the war. And if we stay out of the war, then they probably would have a pretty good shot at, winning. Appeasement. And I know this is kind of a quick review. We're not doing all of World War II, guys. We're just going to go up to the front end. We're going to go to Pearl Harbor. So I know there's a little review for world history, but we'll get through it real quick. Adolf Hitler, and he's marching on the backs of all these people. Appeasement, right? Is that what we're talking about? Let's see. Japan attacked China in 1937. Japan doesn't say this is a war. Oh, I'm sorry. The United States says, no, that's not a war. It was just an attack. It was an aggressive move. So we can keep selling guns to China and Japan for that matter, but that's a whole other story. Hitler breaks the Versailles Treaty, and then he starts assembling a military. Remember, the Versailles Treaty was the treaty that Germany signed at the end of World War I that said, we did it, it's all our fault, and we'll promise we're going to be good from here on out. Well, Hitler's like, forget that. And so he starts building himself an army, and nobody stops him. Nobody stops him. So when nobody stopped him from building an army, he was like, must be okay to build an army then. And then Hitler basically invades Austria, although technically he was Austrian. And so he basically kind of just combined Germany and Austria in 1938. And people were like, hey, whoa, no, 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 no. And Hitler's like, well, yeah, but see, I'm Austrian, so it kind of makes sense that we put these countries together. And people were like, okay, but don't do it again. And then Hitler invades Czechoslovakia in 1939, and people are like, whoa, no, 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 no. And Hitler's like, yeah, but technically, like, my grandma was from Czechoslovakia, or my great uncle's barber was from Czechoslovakia, or something like that. So, I mean, it's kind of like Austria, which is kind of like Germany. So technically, and people are like, okay, so don't do that anymore. And then he invades the Rhineland, he invades the Sudetenland, he invades Alsace-Lorraine, and each time, people say, hey, stop. And Hitler's like, well, I mean, yeah, but, I mean, these people over here, they actually speak German. I mean, they speak more German than they speak French, so technically they're really Germans. And we might as well just kind of, add that to our own collective. It's called appeasement. He keeps getting told stop, but there are no punishments. So he's like, it must be okay. That's called appeasement. Here we have the British guy and the French guy. Yeah, the British guy, the very far end of the French guy, and here's Nazi Germany and Nazi Germany. And so Nazi Germany's weight is on top of, let's see, Austria and Czechoslovakia and the Balkans and the Mid-East and the whole, what does it say? HW State. I wonder what that is. And then France and Britain they're talking to each other and they're like, hey, it's okay, right? Why should we take a stand about someone pushing someone else when it's so far away? Oh, the domino effect, look at that. So, in August of 1939, Hitler and Stalin, that can't be good. Hitler and Stalin, they form a pact, the non-aggression pact, and they split Poland right down the middle, and Hitler gets half, and Stalin gets half, and Poland's like, what? What? We weren't even invited to the party. What? And on September 1st, 1939, Hitler blows in across the border into Poland, and we had the beginning of World War II. So, what is it called? Blitzkrieg, right? With the tanks, and just Blitzkrieg is when the tanks all line up and they just go. And if you're in the way, you're in the way. Britain and France declare war on Germany. The Neutrality Act of 1939, immediately we enforce that. FDR says, nope, there's now official war, so now we're going to be neutral. The European democracies, interestingly enough, look at that, Neutrality Act 1939, European democracies may buy war material from the United States. You can buy guns and stuff from us, but you have to pay cash in advance. Because we're not stupid, because last time we gave you guns and stuff and you never paid for them. So now you can buy them from us, but you've got to pay cash ahead of time. Here we go. Plus, look at that, the influx of cash, that extra money that we're getting from, the European democracies. That helps us. Great Depression. Oh, see, Great Depression. Now we're going to start coming out of it because now we've got money coming in. All right. The first couple months were dubbed the phony war because France and Britain weren't actually part of the war. It was over there in Poland, and Poland didn't really put up a fight. And people were like, what's really going on here? And then in April and May of 1940, Germany turns around and attacks France. Goes through Belgium and Denmark and what am I saying? The Netherlands, and then boom, we've got ourselves a situation. So the United States realized the United Kingdom was the only nation standing in the way of Germany, because France, they went down fast. It was like awkward for France. They went down fast. So the United States begins to build a large air fleet and a 2-ocean navy. I wonder if we should have been doing that before. September 6, 1940, we have a new conscription law. You guys know conscription, that's the draft. And then the Havana Conference in 1940, the United States pledges to protect the Latin American countries from the evil, awful Germany. Oh, look at this, Monroe Doctrine again. Good for us, look at this. Let's see, the old family bathtub is plenty safe for me. And we've got the American with the America First hat. The American with the America First hat, and he's in the American Hemisphere bathtub, but you note that there are various creatures in the bathtub, including the shark and the alligator and the I was going to say octopus, but what word am I looking for? Cephalopod. See, I can use big words. Monday. See, I'm starting to get out of my fog there. And then the crab, or the crustacean. Look at that. Somebody tell Mrs. Jones I know some of these words. Crocodilian, ichthyoid, and they all have the swastika representing the Nazis. Oof, right. Let's see, the Holocaust, November 9th, 1838, we had Kristallnacht over there in Germany. We talked all about this in world history, so we're not going to spend a lot of time here, but let's see, Nazi Germany begins the roundup and deportation and concentration of Jews. Remember, we had the final solution, the final solution of the Jewish problem was to eliminate the Jews from Hitler's point of view and those other awful, awful people. So we had the Buchenwald and Auschwitz and Bergen-Belsen and Treblinka, and the concentration camps. We know all about the ovens and the gas chambers and all that. Again, what we talked about last year. 6 million Jews, gypsies, homosexuals, dissidents were murdered. And here's the deal, the United States of America, we didn't know. We are taught in American history that America didn't know. Now, whether that's true or not, that's what we're told that we didn't know. The idea being, had we known, would we have rushed over there sooner? Possibly. But we are told in American history, well, the Americans, we didn't know this was going on yet. FDR creates the War Refugee Board to help victims, not necessarily of the Holocaust, but of refugees from the war. Awful. August 1940, the Battle of Britain. Remember, again, see, I don't want to do world history here, we're just doing it real quick. The Battle of Britain was when the German bombers went over London and dropped bombs, and so all the Londoners were told to turn off their lights, and so the bombers wouldn't be able to figure out where anything was because all the lights were off. And so there you go. And then we talked about last year, we talked about the radar and the London, the RAF, Royal Air Force, and China, and all that kind of stuff. So that's going on here. radio broadcast of that is being broadcast back to the United States. So we are not ignorant with regard to what's going on in the United Kingdom. Committee to Defend America by Aiding the Allies versus the America First Committee. So we have the let's get in the war, let's stay out of the war. Fortunately, in the year 2021, oh no, we have. In September 1940, FDR, all right, so what was the rule? The rule was, we will give you guns and tanks and planes, but you have to buy them from us cash ahead of time. Watch how this is. In September 1940, FDR transfers 50 World War I destroyer ships to Britain in exchange for 8 defensive base sites around the world. I mean, they didn't buy them with cash. We transferred them to an ally in exchange for... But we're going to be neutral. We're neutral. Now the Germans are like, whoa! Neutral? Assuming Britain would shortly fall. That's a great line. Since we were watching and we saw that the UK was about to fall apart and London was going to be blown up and the Germans were going to win, we decided to change the rules and we're going to do the Lend-Lease program. All right, the Lend-Lease program is a fabulous idea. Remember, we're not going to give you stuff unless you pay for it ahead of time. We can transfer stuff to you. But now here's the new rule. The Lend-Lease rule says we're going to let you borrow tanks. We're going to let you borrow guns. We're going to let you borrow airplanes. We're going to let you borrow them. And then after the war, after you're done with them, then you're going to give them back to us. The Lend-Lease plan. Can you imagine being over in Germany, in the headquarters of Germany, going, What? That's not neutral. That's yeah. Hitler actually he sees this and he realizes that we're really declaring war on him at this point. You're playing with dynamite. Planned to lend Britain arms. In May of 1941, German U-boat sinks the U.S. Robin Moore in the South Pacific. So again. Over here we've got Dr. Seuss. You can always kind of tell it's Dr. Seuss because of how it's drawn. Plus, it says Dr. Seuss right there. It's truly encouraging how much of this stuff drifts into British ports. And so we've got Dr. Seuss backing up the truck and he's dropping these planes and tanks and giant cannons into the ocean. And that stuff just happens to end up in London. But then you also see the sign that says we're 2/3 of the way already across the Atlantic Ocean, and same here. There you go. Oh, there's FDR, and he's sitting down next to Churchill. Hitler gets greedy, decides to attack the Soviet Union. Oh, man. Decides to attack the Soviet Union. What was that? June of 1941. Why? Because Russia has oil, and Germany not so much. So Hitler's going to invade Russia. The Soviet Union. Whoops. FDR sends military supplies to the Soviet Union. America helping the Soviet Union. FDR and Prime Minister Churchill meet in August 1941, and they're going to bang out the 8-point Atlantic Charter. And there they are. No territorial changes, popular sovereignty, disarmament, freedom of the wants and fear, lowering tariffs, freedom of the seas. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's 6 points of the 8-point charter. I wonder if Hitler. I'm sitting here thinking. I wonder if Hitler listened to his. Oh no, I already know this answer, but I'm gonna pretend like I don't. I wonder if Hitler listened to his AP World History teacher when his AP World History teacher was talking about Napoleon invading Russia at the time. See Russia, and then remember Napoleon, the winter of 1812, and the freezing to death, and the 500,000 troops, and freezing to death, and Napoleon being beaten, and so Hitler invades the Soviet Union in June, and he's going to, that means he's going to be somewhere around Stalingrad, somewhere in December, and February.
20 minutes. 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 20 minutes.
in the cold in Russia. The moral of the story is listen to your AP World History teacher, or your World History teacher, or your AP US History, or your regular US History teacher. Not your math teacher. Your math teacher has no idea what's going on. The United States destroyers versus Hitler's U-boats because several shipments to Britain were sunk. How dare they by German U-boats? Congress repeals. We repealed the Neutrality Act in November 1941, and we're going to allow ships to arm themselves. I mean, they were already doing it, but now we're technically going to allow them to do it. And then they can also be escorted by U.S. Navy ships. So look, another Dr. Seuss cartoon. And who knows what would have happened? Would we have actually ever declared war with Germany, or would we have just pretended not to be in the war and just kept giving Britain, lending them tanks and planes and stuff? And I'm sure at some point we were going to lend them people with machine guns. I'm sure we would have done that. I don't know if we ever would have declared war. But then Japan made a poor decision. In September 1940, Japan had allied with Germany. U.S. cuts its aid off to Japan. I mean, we were giving Japan money and guns. Hindsight being 20/20. U.S. tells Japan that they would reopen trade if Japan made peace with China. Japan disagrees, and on December 7th of 1941, it was a Sunday morning, Japan attacks the United States at Pearl Harbor. 2,348 American deaths. And a lot of our ships were destroyed and or disabled. Talk about that more in a second. The next day, December 8th, Fdr gives his very famous today's the day infamy speech. I think that's in your readings. And Congress declares war. So now we're in it. Germany and Italy declare war on the United States on December 11th. The errand boy did well on his first assignment. So it's an interesting cartoon. So you've got Hitler talking to the Japanese soldier there, and he goes, hey, hey. And he says, did they squirm? Did they squirm much? So if you look at Pearl Harbor, awful, right? Awful, awful. The idea being, Sunday, and I think I talked about this a little bit last year, the idea being that they attacked on Sunday. A lot of our troops were either sleeping because they could sleep in a little bit on Sundays, or they were in chapel. The Japanese came over flying their little bitty paper airplanes, their Zeros, that were basically, they're basically made out of paper and an engine. I think it's a Mitsubishi engine. I'll have to look that up. But and they fly really close together. So on the radar, it looks like a kind of a giant mass, because the radar in 1941 wasn't very good, and so the radar operator on the naval base, he's kind of looking at the radar and he's like, that looks weird, and he calls somebody, and the person goes, it's nothing, and then he calls somebody else, and he goes, don't worry about it, and he calls somebody else, and goes, when I wake up and I get my cup of coffee, I'll come out and I'll see it, and then it's too late. And so here come the Japanese Zeros, the airplanes, and they come in. And they do terrible things to our ships. So there's the Arizona, is that right? Is that the famous? And then the airport down there. So one of the ironies here is that in military, everything has got to be in perfect straight lines, right? If you drive out there, if you drive down on Airport Road and you're going over there by John Glenn, if the C-130s are parked out there in front of their hangar, as you're going by John Glenn, you look back to the west. If the C-130s are out there, there's 3 or 4 of them sometimes, and they're lined up. When you drive by them, you can see that they are exactly in line, because that's what the military does. You are in perfectly within like a millimeter being in line. You're all in lockstep. You're all in lockstep, etc., etc. You guys know this. Those of you in ROTC, you know how that works. Well, here we are at Pearl Harbor, and you see all the ships, and look how they're all nicely in line, all lined up in this perfect line right there. It looks good. It looks good. But if you're in a Japanese plane with a torpedo or two, it's not hard to miss, right? It's not hard to miss when they're all in a nice line. You just fly right over and there you go. And then when you're done dropping your torpedo in the water, then you swing back around and you come in with your machine gun, and you don't have to worry about hitting this ship or that ship or that ship over there because they're in a perfect line. You just go right down the tops of them. Yeah, it was bad. It was bad. The Japanese, it was like the perfect strike. I mean, you almost have to give it to them, right? They sank several of our ships. Over 2,000 people died. The USS Oklahoma sank. Yeah, we had some crazy stuff there. Now, there was a bright spot. The bright spot was that our carriers, the big old ships with the airplanes on them, the carriers, which were with this group, they weren't there that day. They were actually south of, I think it was south of Hawaii, about, what was that, 40, 50 miles, whatever it was, doing some training exercises. The Japanese thought they would be there because the carriers were the #1 target. Because if you can sink a carrier, one, a carrier has like 5,000 people on it, but two, also, there's planes and everything on top of the carrier. So it's a major target, but they weren't there that day. So that was fortunate for us. Okay. Awful. If you get a chance to go to Hawaii, so ask yourself, where did we get this picture? So this picture was taped to the front inside cockpit of all the Japanese Zeros that morning, because a couple of days before, a Japanese tourist had taken this picture, flew back to Japan, made hundreds of copies, put them in the airplanes, and so when the Japanese fighter pilots are flying in, they already know, they've already been assigned that one or that one or that one or that one. So, if you get a chance to go to Hawaii, this is the last slide, yeah? Oh, no, say the last slide. The penultimate slide. Big word, good for me. Penultimate, which means second to the last. You can see the USS Arizona there under the water, and then that's the Arizona Memorial. Yeah, you can go out to Hawaii today and go across a little ferry. Oh, yeah, that's right, the little boat right there. You can go across a little ferry and go out there. In the memorial, the floors are glass, and so you can look down and see the Arizona. It was decided that the Arizona was a bad deal because the torpedo hit the magazine room, which is where all the ammunition was. So not only did the torpedo make a big old boom, but then it hit the powder, right, and the dynamite, and then it was a bigger boom. Big bada boom. You may get that reference. Arizona sank, and awful. The United States government decided to leave the sailors who died there. So that is their grave. So today, we're talking, so it's 1941, so we're talking about 80 years ago. Oh, yeah, look at that, 80 years ago. So the bodies are, long since decayed, but that is all one giant grave there. Quote of the day, the last slide, the quote of the day. Isoroku Yamamoto. Yamamoto was the admiral who was in charge of the strike. Hirohito is the emperor. Yamamoto is the admiral. So Yamamoto, a pretty interesting quote from him is, "I fear all we have done is to awaken a sleeping giant and fill him with a terrible resolve." Hindsight being 2020, he was correct. They punched us in the mouth, and man, they punched us hard, and They almost knocked us out. They almost, with one punch, almost knocked us out. But we had a standing 8 count, and we got up. And a couple years later, we're going to introduce them to Fat Man and Little Boy. That's the next video. All right, I'm going to try to get this loaded up on the internet here in about however long it takes me to do that. And I'll see you. Oh my goodness, there's a chance I'm going to see you tomorrow on Zoom. And we'll see if that actually happens. All right, see you in a little bit. Be good.